Captain Mark Driscoll swore quietly as the control panel of the stellar Wayfarer lit up with red warning lights. The ship systems were failing one by one. What should have been a simple cargo run from the outer colonies had turned into a nightmare. Moments earlier, he had been flying through the Andromeda Rim, an area known for its unpredictable magnetic storms, when his ship was hit by a strong surge of energy that sent it off course. Come on, he muttered, working the controls. The ship's sensors were useless, scrambled by the storm. He reached for the communication system, hoping to send out a distress signal before the Wayfarer crashed onto the unknown planet below. But no matter what he tried, the ship wouldn't respond. The atmospheric drag pulled him down hard, the whole ship groaning in protest as the planet's gravity dragged him closer. Mark's heart raced as the viewport showed glimpses of a green world below. Vast forests and sprawling mountains covered the surface, lit by twin suns hanging low in the sky. It was beautiful, but it also meant his chances of survival were slim. A jungle planet like this was known for its many dangers. The ship's alarms blared louder, and before Mark could brace himself, the Wayfarer entered the planet's upper atmosphere. The impact rocked the ship, throwing him against his harness, and he blacked out as the vessel plummeted through the sky. When Mark's senses returned, he blinked, trying to clear the blur from his vision. He lay sprawled on soft ground, the smell of damp earth and lush greenery filling his nose. Groaning, he sat up, wincing from the sharp pain in his ribs. His crash harness had saved his life, but his body was bruised and battered from the rough landing. His ship, the stellar Wayfarer, was a crumpled wreck not far from him, with smoke rising from its damaged hull. Miraculously, it hadn't exploded on impact, but he knew his chances of repairing it and escaping the planet were almost none. Mark checked the emergency beacon strapped to his wrist. The display flickered with static and showed no signal. Whatever storm had brought his ship down was still interfering with communications. He was stranded. Pulling himself to his feet, he looked around at the alien landscape. Towering trees stretched hundreds of feet into the sky, their thick trunks wrapped in vines and glowing flowers. Strange bird-like creatures flitted between the branches, and in the distance, a waterfall cascaded down a cliff, its roar muffled by the dense foliage. "Okay," Mark muttered to himself, trying to shake off the disorientation. Find shelter, get supplies. He began to move toward the wreckage of his ship to salvage what he could when the ground trembled beneath him. At first, it was subtle, but the tremors grew stronger with each passing second. He froze, scanning the horizon. The trees in the distance swayed, as if something big was moving through the jungle. The rumbling intensified, and Mark's heart pounded in his chest. He quickly ducked behind a fallen tree trunk, peering through the gaps in the branches. What he saw next was unbelievable. 3 women emerged from the thick jungle, each towering at least 20 feet tall. Their footsteps shook the ground as they moved gracefully, defying their size. They were stunningly beautiful, with features that seemed otherworldly. Their skin shimmered faintly, almost like it absorbed the sunlight filtering through the trees. They wore clothes made from the hides of strange beasts, intricately woven with what looked like threads of gold and silver. Their long, flowing hair sparkled like liquid metal in shades of gold, silver, and copper. Their large, bright eyes were filled with curiosity and intelligence. Despite their immense size, they moved with the grace of dancers, their strong yet feminine bodies captivating. Mark's breath caught in his throat. He had heard stories of massive humanoid species in the outer reaches of the galaxy, thought to be myths, but here they were before him. The lead woman, slightly taller than the others, knelt down, her huge hands reaching toward the wreckage of the ship. Mark watched as her enormous fingers carefully inspected the crumpled hull. Her expression softened with recognition as she looked at the markings on the ship, then turned her attention to the ground where he had crashed. "I sense him," she said, her deep voice resonating like distant thunder. "He's close." Mark's blood ran cold. He hadn't expected them to speak, much less in a language he understood. Before he could react, The giant woman turned her head, her glowing blue eyes locking onto the very tree he was hiding behind. With one swift movement, she stood tall and took a step toward him, shaking the ground. "Come out, human," she called, her voice firm yet gentle. "We mean you no harm." Mark swallowed hard, knowing he couldn't outrun them. His mind raced with options. Stay hidden and hope they moved on, or face them and hope they weren't hostile. Realizing he had no choice, Mark slowly stood and stepped out from behind the tree. The three giant women watched him closely, their eyes widening in surprise and relief. "It's true," the lead woman whispered, awe in her voice. "Another one has come." She knelt again, lowering herself to his level. Her gaze was soft, filled with a hope he hadn't expected. The other two women stood, their eyes fixed on him with curiosity and anticipation. "You are human," she said, her voice reverent. "You must come with us." "Come with you?" Mark stammered, his voice shaky. "Why, who are you?" The woman extended her hand, palm up, inviting him rather than commanding him. Her hand was large enough for him to stand in. "We are the daughters of Vera, the last of our kind, and you, human, may be our salvation." Before Mark could protest, the giantess gently scooped him up, cradling him in her hand as she rose to her full height. From her perspective, he could see miles of jungle stretching out in every direction, but his mind was racing with the enormity of what had just happened. They were taking him somewhere, and he had no idea what awaited him. As they walked deeper into the forest, Mark tried to ask questions, but the giants remained silent, their faces set in quiet determination. They reached the edge of a huge clearing, and what lay beyond took Mark's breath away. A village appeared, nestled among the towering trees. But this was no ordinary village. The buildings were enormous, built into the trunks and branches of the colossal trees. Walkways and bridges connected the homes, all crafted from living wood and vines. It was an architectural wonder that blended seamlessly with nature, as if the forest itself had grown the buildings. In the center of the village, surrounded by dozens of giant women, sat an even larger figure, a woman who was taller and more majestic than the rest. Her sharp eyes were filled with the wisdom of centuries, and she wore a crown made of woven gold and silver branches. She was the leader of the tribe, and as Mark was brought before her, she looked down at him with a mix of sorrow and hope. "You have come at last, human," she said, her voice rumbling through the clearing like distant thunder. "You are the one we have waited for. Our tribe is dying, and we have no more men. You must father our children." Mark stood in stunned silence, his heart racing. He had crash-landed on a world full of beautiful giant women, and now they were asking him to save their species. The words echoed in his mind. "You must father our children." It was an impossible demand, something from a wild dream or a nightmare. Yet the solemn expressions on the faces of the giant women around him told him this was serious. The weight of their desperation hung in the air like a heavy fog. The leader, the tallest and most regal of them all, sat on her throne of living wood, her golden crown shining in the soft sunlight filtering through the massive trees above. Her deep, wise eyes were fixed on him, filled with immense power and grace, but also a sadness that ran deep. "I know this is overwhelming," she said, her voice steady yet filled with ancient sorrow. "But we have waited so long. You are the first human to set foot on this planet in many generations. Our legend spoke of a kind man who could save us from extinction." Mark struggled to find his voice. "Save you? How? I don't understand what you're asking of me." The giant woman rose from her throne with a grace that belied her size and motioned for Mark to follow her. Despite his hesitation, he walked alongside her as she led him out of the central clearing and deeper into the village. As they moved through the settlement, Mark noticed more giant women watching him with curiosity and hope. Some were even whispering to each other as they saw him. The buildings nestled in the trees, carved from living trunks, were like nothing Mark had ever seen. They were elegant yet primal, as if nature itself had shaped them for the women. It was clear that these giants lived in harmony with their surroundings, using the forest's resources without harming it. Birds and strange alien creatures flitted through the branches, completely unafraid of the enormous beings below. The leader spoke as they walked, her deep voice echoing through the air. Our people, the daughters of Vera, were once a thriving civilization. We were scholars, artists, warriors, and leaders. We lived in balance with our world for centuries. This planet is called Area, named after our first queen. They came to a large open space in the forest, where towering stone statues stood in a circle. The figures were carved from black and white stone, worn by time but still majestic. They depicted giant men as tall as the women who now ruled the land. Each statue was intricately detailed with powerful, noble features and regal clothing. Mark felt a chill run down his spine as he realized these were not just art pieces, but monuments to a lost people. The giantess stopped before one of the statues, a towering figure with eyes that seemed to gaze into eternity. "These were our fathers, our brothers, our sons," she said, her voice filled with sadness. "But they are gone, all of them." "What happened to them?" Mark asked, his voice barely above a whisper. She turned to face him, her eyes filled with centuries of grief. "Long ago, our world was at peace. But we were not alone in this part of the galaxy. Another race, cruel and vicious beings from distant stars, invaded Illyria. They wanted to take our resources and brought war to our land. Our men fought bravely to defend us, using powerful weapons and technology beyond what your human race can imagine." As she traced the stone surface of the statue, it was as if she could still feel the presence of the man it represented. But it wasn't enough. The invaders unleashed a weapon that specifically targeted our male population. The men fell one by one to a plague, a sickness that wiped them out completely, while we women were left untouched. Mark's mind raced at the enormity of what she was saying. An entire civilization's male population wiped out by an alien disease, leaving only women behind. He couldn't imagine such a loss. "How did you survive?" he asked, filled with awe and horror. "We adapted," she said softly. "We became warriors, leaders, and protectors of our world. We drove the invaders away, but the damage was already done. Without our men, our population dwindled. For generations, we sought a way to continue. We tried to reproduce using ancient technologies and rituals, but nothing worked. The curse of infertility has plagued us for centuries." Mark felt the weight of her words settle over him. He looked up at the towering statue, its cold stone face staring down at him. It was clear that these women weren't asking him for something small. They were asking for his help to save their species from extinction. "But why me?" he asked, feeling anxious. "I'm just a pilot. I'm not special. What makes you think I can help?" The giant woman turned to him, her eyes filled with a strange mix of hope and certainty. "Our ancestors foretold that one day a man from the stars would come, a man not of our blood, but from another world. Your kind, the humans, have enough of our essence to bring life back to our people. We believe that your genetic code can restore what we have lost." Mark blinked, stunned. "You think my DNA can somehow fix this?" "Yes," she replied, her gaze unwavering. "It is the only hope we have left." She led him deeper into the forest, past the statues of their fallen men, to a great temple carved into the heart of a towering mountain. The entrance was framed by ancient symbols and runes that glowed faintly in the twilight. Inside, a vast chamber awaited, its walls lined with murals showing the history of their people, glorious, tragic, and eternal. At the center of the chamber was a massive stone basin, filled with glowing liquid that pulsed with life. The liquid cast an eerie light across the room, illuminating the faces of ancient giants carved into the walls. "This is the heart of our people," the giantess said as they approached the basin. "This is where the bond will be made. Our scholars believe that your blood, combined with the essence of the sacred pool, can awaken the fertility we have lost. It will bring life back to our people." Mark stared at the glowing pool, feeling a mix of awe and fear. "You want me to father children with your people?" She nodded, her expression solemn. Yes, not just children, but a new generation of our race. Without you, we will die. Our line will end, but with you, we can live again. Mark stepped back, his heart racing. The enormity of what they were asking hit him like a tidal wave. Could he really do this? Could he be the father of an entire race? The pressure was overwhelming. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about the future of a whole species. I don't know if I can do this, he admitted, his voice cracking. The giantess knelt before him, her immense size dwarfing him. But her tone was gentle and pleading. You are our last hope, human. I know this is not the life you expected, but we have no one else. If you refuse, our people will vanish into history like the wind in the trees. I beg you, please. For the first time since his crash, Mark saw the full tragedy that had befallen these women. They weren't asking for a favor. They were asking for survival, and he was the only one who could help them. As he stared into the glowing pool, the murals on the walls, and the faces of the women who had welcomed him with hope, something inside him shifted. He hadn't chosen this path, but maybe it had chosen him. I need time, Mark said, his voice barely above a whisper. I need to think. The giantess nodded, rising to her full height. We understand. You will have time to make your choice, but know that time is not on our side. With that, she led him back to the village, where he was given a place to rest high in the trees, surrounded by the peaceful sounds of the forest. As he lay there staring up at the stars, Mark knew that his decision would determine the fate of an entire civilization, and he wasn't sure if he was ready for such a responsibility. Mark spent the night in the village, trying to rest beneath the canopy of towering trees. Despite the peaceful surroundings, sleep eluded him. His mind churned with thoughts of what the giantess had told him. The weight of their request pressed down on him, like a heavy burden. Outside the village, the night was quiet, filled with the soft sounds of nocturnal creatures. Strange bioluminescent plants lit up the pathways, casting a soft glow over the landscape. Despite the beauty of the world around him, Mark's mind was consumed by the enormity of his decision. He had never wanted this. He was a simple pilot, a man who had taken to the stars to escape life on Earth. All he wanted was the freedom of space, the thrill of exploration. He hadn't signed up to save an entire civilization, yet here he was, the fate of the giant women resting squarely on his shoulders. Unable to rest, Mark got up from the makeshift bed the giants had made for him, a huge hammock made of thick vines and soft furs. He stepped out into the open air, drawn to the cool breeze rustling the trees. The village was lit by the twin moons hanging low in the sky, casting everything in a pale silver light. He wandered along the elevated pathways, high among the treetops, his thoughts heavy. The giant women moved silently below, their glowing eyes watching him, but no one approached. They gave him space, understanding the weight of what they had asked. Yet every glance filled him with hope and silent expectation. They were all waiting for his answer. Mark reached a small clearing where a waterfall cascaded into a pool far below. He sat on a ledge, staring out at the alien landscape. His thoughts drifted to the statues he had seen earlier, the massive stone men who had once walked this world. Now they were gone, reduced to memories. Would the same fate befall the women if he refused? Before he could get lost in his thoughts, he heard a familiar soft voice behind him. You can't sleep either. Mark turned to see Arya approaching, her towering form moving gracefully. She wore a long, flowing robe made of woven silver and gold fibers, shimmering in the moonlight. Though her face was regal, it held deep sadness. I didn't mean to disturb you, she said, kneeling beside him. Even in this position, she still towered over him. But there was a gentleness to her presence, a softness that contrasted with her powerful stature. You didn't, Mark replied, his voice low. He shifted awkwardly, unsure how to speak to someone who had placed the survival of an entire species at his feet. I just can't stop thinking about everything. Arya gazed out at the waterfall, her expression thoughtful. It is not a small thing we've asked of you, Mark, I know this. You are far from home, in a strange and overwhelming place. Yet we have placed our hopes in you. I don't want you to feel forced, but our situation is dire. Mark ran a hand through his hair, still trying to grasp the gravity of it all. But why me? Why now? There are billions of people in the galaxy. Why was I the one who landed here? I don't even know if I can do what you're asking. I'm not some hero or savior. Arya sighed softly, her gaze fixed on the shimmering pool below. I understand how you feel, but there are things in the universe that we can't control. Maybe you were always meant to be here. Perhaps it's fate. I'm not asking you to be a hero, just for your help, she said quietly. Our people have been alone for so long. We've tried everything to survive and bring life back to our tribe, but nothing has worked. We are dying, and soon no one will remember us. You are our last hope, not just for survival, but for a chance to live and love again. Her words touched Mark deeply. He could hear her desperation and the weight of loss she carried, not just as a leader, but as someone who had seen her people fade away. It was about giving them a future worth living for. I'm just one man, he whispered, shaking his head. How can I make such a difference? I don't know if I'm strong enough. She turned to him, her eyes filled with determination. Strength isn't about being fearless. It's about moving forward despite your fears. You've already shown great strength by surviving the crash and facing the situation. That's why I believe you are the one we've waited for. She gently placed her huge hand beside him. This isn't an easy choice, but remember, you won't be alone. We will honor, support, and cherish you for what you give us. You won't just be the father of our children. You'll be part of our tribe, part of our family. Mark felt a lump in his throat. Her sincerity was clear. She wasn't asking for his help out of selfishness, but out of love for her people and their chance to have a future. I don't know if I can ever go back, he said quietly. If I agree, this will be my life now, right? Her expression softened. Yes, your life will change, but it will be a life filled with purpose and connection. You will be part of something bigger than us. Remember for generations. Not as an outsider, but as a man who saved our race from extinction. Mark felt a tightness in his chest. He had always seen himself as a drifter, someone with no roots or lasting purpose. He had left Earth for freedom, but now he realized that true freedom was about choosing how he wanted to impact the world. I'm scared, he admitted. She smiled gently, radiating warmth. I am too. But sometimes fear pushes us to be stronger and do things we never thought we could. I see that strength in you. They sat in silence, listening to the waterfall. Mark felt a calmness wash over him, as if the universe was waiting for his decision. After what felt like forever, he exhaled slowly and looked up at her. Her eyes were full of hope, but also understanding. I'll do it, he said quietly. I'll help your people. Her face lit up with relief and gratitude. She didn't need to say anything. Her look said it all. Mark wasn't sure if he was making the right choice, but for the first time, he felt part of something bigger. He was about to become a savior, a father, and a protector of an entire race. Despite his fear, he realized this might be the purpose he had been searching for. The next morning, as the sun rose over the forest, Mark stood at the edge of the village. The giant women gathered to greet the day, and the air felt alive with energy and anticipation. Arya stood beside him, her hand on his shoulder. Thank you for choosing us, she said softly. Mark nodded, still processing his decision. What happens now? As the months passed, more children were born, each one a living testament to the union between Mark and the tribe of giants. The village was filled with laughter and joy as the children grew strong and healthy, representing the hope of their people. Mark's life changed in ways he never expected, but standing among the women and children, he felt a deep sense of fulfillment. He had given them a future, but in doing so, he had found his own. He was no longer the lost pilot drifting through the stars. He was a father, a protector, and part of something greater than himself. As the tribe thrived, Mark knew their future was secure. The tribe of beautiful giant women would continue, and he would be remembered not just as a man who fathered their children, but as the man who had given them hope.